And welcome to our online guests. We're so sorry you can't be here because everyone's having so much fun here on their liquid diet. And today we're going to have a look at what stopping food actually does. Yesterday we had a look at your organs of elimination and the importance of keeping them eliminating very well while you're on the detox. But this morning we're going to be looking at your liver, and your liver is the organ that is orchestrating the detox. The liver is often called the project manager because everything that goes into the body goes first to the liver, and everything that comes out of the body comes out under the jurisdiction of the liver. So what we're going to first of all do, have a look at what goes into the body and what the liver does with it. So we're going to have a look at foods. And never in the history of mankind have human beings eaten so many carbohydrates. I think you'll agree with me. We've become high carbohydrates consumers. You just go into any supermarket and there's usually a whole aisle devoted to bread, a whole aisle devoted to cereal, and almost a whole aisle devoted to pasta. There's certainly a large section devoted to cakes. Now I'm just going to say cakes, etc., because this takes into consideration croissants, muffins, cookies, biscuits. We call what you call cookies, we call those biscuits. I think your biscuits are like a scone, so a roll, something like that. So pretzels, so there's your etc. Also another high carbohydrate is pizza, rice is another carbohydrate, potatoes, and products made with potatoes abound. There's your French fries, your chips, you call them potato crisps or chips. And then last and certainly least in nutritive value is the pure crystallized acid extracted from the sugarcane plant. Would you agree with me? High carbohydrate consumers. I don't think anyone just chose to eat that way, it's just convenient. And we're such a fast society that it's just grab, eat. But if you live on the farm, this is not fast food. All this has to be made. What's the fast food down on the farm? Fruits and vegetables. That's your best fast food shop, is your fruit and vegetable shop. All of these foods in the gastrointestinal tract break down to a singular structure called glucose. And glucose gets absorbed out of the gut into the blood, goes on the M1 main highway, portal vein straight to the liver. And then the liver determines what happens to that glucose. And the first place it goes is to the cell. So the glucose goes into the cell under the action of insulin. It goes through a 20-step pathway. And that 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. The end result of the 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. And pyruvate is the chemical form of glucose that gets fed into what's often called the powerhouse of the cell, because this 8-step pathway delivers to us 36 units of energy. What a difference. Now we're going to be looking at this pathway several times this week, so you'll get to know it well. But this is the first place that glucose is sent, is down this, it's called the energy pathways in the body that give us energy. By the way, the difference is oxygen. This 8-step pathway uses oxygen, which is why we get so much energy. This pathway, no oxygen, it's called the anaerobic pathway, but we'll look at that a little bit more in some other lectures. What we're doing today is looking at what happens to glucose. So the first place that glucose is sent, and it is the liver that's doing this, is to the cell to go through the energy pathways. But on a high carbohydrate diet, we've still got glucose left over, and now it gets stored. It gets stored like a little bunch of grapes. and they're little molecules of glucose, and they're called glycogen. Glycogen is a name given to quick-release glucose stores. And that's why it was not an unreasonable request for us to ask you to exercise this morning. You might think it was very unreasonable. We're not feeding you solid food. We only gave you water this morning, broth last night. Now your glycogen stores are there, and when you start moving the body and the body needs fuel, it starts plucking those glycogen stores, putting them through the energy cycle to give us energy. It's a wonderful process. Now, in a muscle cell, these glycogen stores are basically like in a prison. They can only be used by the muscle. But the liver also can store glycogen. And this glycogen can be sent all over the body. Yes, even to your brain. But on a high carbohydrate diet, we've still got glucose left over. And so now it gets stored in the most amazing fuel depot in the human body. It's called fat cells. And what's happening with Americans on this high carbohydrate diet? They're getting bigger and bigger. And when I go down to downtown Roanoke, oh, those people are big. They're big. And if you have a look in their trolleys in the supermarket, what do you see? You see a lot of this. A lot of this. So the third place that the liver stores all this excess glucose is as fat. Now can you see, I've just given you the basic science here, can you see that fat doesn't make you fat? What makes you fat? It's the high carbohydrate diet. And there is a doctor that made this very famous. His name's Dr. Robert Atkins. We've all heard of Dr. Robert Atkins. Very interesting story. He was overweight, knew his science, which was what I've just shown you. So he decided, he came up with a theory that if he stopped all carbohydrates, he theorised his body would start to live on his fat stores and he would lose weight. Did it work? Oh yes. His book was #1 on the New York Times best-selling book list 4 years running. Nutritionists and doctors hated him. Someone loved him. Who loved him? The people. And you know why? Because it worked. So what did he eat in his experiment? He knew that his gastrointestinal tract needed fibre. So 3 cups of vegetables a day. And the food with no carbohydrate was meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs. So he had lots of protein. And in meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs, he was also getting lots of fat. So what was the result of his experiment? The weight just fell off him. When you're not giving your body these quick-release glucose stores, your liver can convert protein and fat to glucose. Your liver can start to break down the fat stores to give you the glucose that your cells need. It's called gluconeogenesis, that's Genesis, is creating glucose from the fat stores. Was he hungry? Never hungry, because there's three foods that keep the food in the stomach longer. Fibre, because it slowly releases the glucose. Protein, because it's in the stomach that protein gets broken down. Fat, because it coats the food, so it takes a little bit longer to break down. So he was never hungry. Did he have energy? Lots, because of the liver being able to convert these to glucose. As he found the perfect diet, so he put some of his patients on it. Oh, they loved it. They could eat everything they can't usually eat on a weight loss diet. Same thing. But you know what he also noticed after a year? Yes, massive weight loss, but diabetics were coming off their medication. You see, on this high carbohydrate diet, the poor old pancreas is getting screamed at all day. More insulin, more insulin, more insulin. But on this diet, the pancreas is getting a break and it starts to revive. People with high cholesterol levels came back to normal. And what are we told we've got to do if we want to get cholesterol levels down? Stop the meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs. Am I right? Yeah, and the drug. That's true. The cholesterol levels were coming down. Atkins scratched his head. His cancer patients were going into remission. Do you remember yesterday? And I do admit I am guilty of information overload. But cancer cells consume 15 times the glucose of any other cell. So when you drastically stop these high glucose foods, the cancer cells can actually self-destruct when they're not getting the glucose they need. What Atkins discovered is that these 3 food groups are the essential food groups. What does essential mean? Body doesn't make, you got to put it in. Fiber's essential because our gut needs to be swept every day. That's what fiber does. Essential because it's in the fiber part of the food that you'll often get a concentration of your nutrients. Did you know that the highest concentration of nutrients in the potato is just under the skin? And when you peel your potatoes, you lose that. We're very thankful to Jamie Oliver, who got people to leave the skins on their potatoes. Protein is an essential nutrient because 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is made up of protein, whether you are 100-pound or 300-pound. This is the membrane around every cell, and we've got 100 trillion of them. The membrane around every cell is 50% protein. Remember yesterday we looked at the DNA, the crossword bands, amino acids. That's a breakdown from the protein that we eat. Protein's essential. You cannot heal without protein. You cannot function without protein. My son James, he was built with my body type, and no boy wants to be this little. And he changed his body type by intense working out. I'll show you a photo of him later. Looks like a bodybuilder now. How did he do it? Yes, intense working out. But you know what he also did? He supplemented with protein. Every bodybuilder, what do they got to supplement with? Protein. You know that, don't you? Yep. Have you seen a picture of Bosnia's husband? Yep. And he's not a young man. Muscle knows no age. Whether you're 9 or 90, you can have strong, strong muscles. But building up those muscles requires protein. It's an essential nutrient. What Atkins also found, and this might surprise you, 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is fat. Whether you're 100 or 300 pound, we're talking about the membrane. Except for the brain cell, it's 70% fat. It's the fattiest organ in the body. And this fat-free diet is a dangerous diet. We had a midwife from Africa, well, she worked in Africa for 30 years, I think. She said at one point, she's in her 80s, she said the African babies were not developing, their brains were not developing, they weren't getting their milestones, and they investigated why this was so, and they discovered that the mothers were watering down the milk. They were watering down the milk, and those little developing brains were not getting enough fat. The brains cannot develop without adequate fat. Let's go to the other end of the scale in the latter years of life. What's happening to people today? They're getting Alzheimer's and dementia. Did you know this is not normal? I've read the Bible and I haven't heard of one case of dementia or Alzheimer's. This is actually a new phenomenon. And it seems to have come right around the time that this fat phobia arose. Stop eating the fat, it'll give you a stroke, heart disease, is that right? When did it really get momentum? Maybe about the 70s, 80s? No, that brain in the latter years of life, it must have adequate fat. Atkins found that these were the 3 essential food groups, but what he discovered was that the non-essential food group, what does that mean? You can actually live without it, was actually carbohydrates. So what's happening with many people on this high carbohydrate diet, they're missing out on the 3 essentials, especially when it's refined, and they're overdoing the non-essential. But how can you do this on a plant-based diet? Let me show you. And we're going to go to Genesis 1. We're going to go to Genesis 1:19, where God tells Adam and Eve what to eat. We're going to look at the food. We're going to have a look at the protein content of the food and the carbohydrate content of the food. And God said, behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed. What's a herb-bearing seed? A herb-bearing seed is a grain. A herb-bearing seed is also a legume. A herb-bearing seed is a seed. So let's assess these three. Grains: wheat, rye, barley, oats, amaranth, buckwheat, millet, corn, so many grains. High in protein, but high in carbohydrate. How many on our carbohydrate list are from the grain section? Grain, 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 and it could be grain, 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 many cakes. Grain, grain. The majority on our carbohydrate list are from the grain section. Legume, what's a legume? Beans, so lentils, chickpeas, lima beans, black-eyed beans, cannellini beans, soybeans, so many different legumes. And if you want to know how to cook legumes, get an Indian cookbook. And by the way, it doesn't have to be hot. They know how to cook legumes. Legumes are high in protein, but they are medium to low in carbohydrate. The fact is that the legume is about a third the carbohydrate that you will find in your grain. What about a seed? Pumpkin seed, sesame seed, sunflower seed. I think you had a chia seed demo this morning, yeah, chias. Seeds are high in protein, but they are quite low in carbohydrate. So God said, behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree, in the which of the tree is a fruit-yielding seed. So what's a fruit-yielding seed? There's your nut. All your nuts come from the fruit of the tree. Pumpkin, so that's your seed. Coming to your nuts now. For your nuts, almond, Brazil, hazel. In fact, when I was in Germany last year, they make the most beautiful hazelnut cake. And it's almost half just ground hazelnuts. It's lovely and rich. And macadamia, I guess you've got to come to Australia to be able to eat macadamias. They're expensive, but they are delicious. We're trying not to talk about food today. Tomorrow, we'll talk about food. Also, almonds. Done almonds, I think. Pecan, or you call them pecans. Walnuts, so many nuts. Nuts are high in protein, but they are quite low in carbohydrate. So to ensure you're getting your three essentials on a plant-based diet, increase your legume, nut, seed part of the meal, and to ensure that you don't overdo the non-essential, decrease the grain part of the meal. That's an easy way to do it. So instead of a plate of pasta, you have a little bit of pasta, lots of sauce and salad. So instead of having a sandwich with 2 slices of bread, use lettuce instead of bread. So you just get that carbohydrate part down. An interesting thing with children, I did not want to be in the kitchen all day long. So I would feed my children well at breakfast, fibre, protein and fat. And I didn't feed them again till lunchtime. How many people think that children have to be fed all day long? We know what I noticed with my girlfriends. They'd feed their kids all day long, and when it came time to eat the meal, they don't want to eat their meal. They don't want to eat their meal because they're not hungry, because they've been nibbling all day long. And you'll notice when children are bored, they say they're hungry. Have you noticed that? But if you divert them, then they lose track. And often that hunger pang between a meal is actually thirst. So give them water. And also, with my children, when you sit at the table, you stay at the table. You stay at the table. And if you hadn't fed them since the last meal, guess what? They're hungry. They're hungry. And so I talk about children because that's where our habits begin. Do Do you remember when you were a kid? When I was a kid, if we were hungry, what did Mum say? Wait for dinner. But it's hardly said for children today. They're just... But you know, their stomachs are the same as ours. They need at least 3.5 to 4 hours to digest the food. And have you ever had a job to do and you keep getting interrupted? And the job that should take 4 hours starts taking 8 hours? That's what happens in the stomach. And so digestive problems are set up from a very early age. But most people stop the fat because of cholesterol. And it really is a total myth. When I finish the lecture this morning, I'll write up on the board. Actually, I probably don't need to write it. I think Vanessa's got a list of it, yeah? Of all the books at our health centre on cholesterol. The Great Cholesterol Myth, The Great Cholesterol Hoax, The Great Cholesterol Lie, The Great Cholesterol Con. We're running out of names. Cholesterol, let me show you what it is and how the body makes it and what's it used for. Proverbs 14 verse 6 says, knowledge is easy to him that understands. So I want to give you an understanding of cholesterol, then you have a knowledge of it. 80% of the cholesterol that our liver makes is made from glucose. And 20% of the cholesterol that our liver makes is made from fat. Now, can you see just this piece of information alone tells you it's not the butter on the bread, it's the bread under the butter that's the problem. And carbohydrates aren't bad. Don't we love them? My husband would never forgive me if the potato stopped. The Germans would never forgive me if the bread stopped. The Asians would never forgive me if the rice stopped. No, carbs aren't bad. They're just when they're refined and overdone. And many today are doing exactly that. Let's have a look at the two main types of cholesterol that the body makes, or the liver makes, which is high density lipoprotein, and it's called the good guy because HDL carries excess cholesterol back to the liver. That's why it's called the good guy. LDL is called the bad guy, but remember, the body doesn't make bad things. There's a purpose for everything the body makes. LDL cholesterol is the repairer and the rebuilder. Wherever you find damage, you'll find LDL, because that's what its role is. It's the repairer and the rebuilder. LDL does something else. It delivers cholesterol to the brain because our brain loves cholesterol. And that's why the Framingham Heart Study, very famous study done in the little town of Framingham, done over probably about 40 years now. They were set up to prove that cholesterol causes heart disease, but they have not been able to do that. But what they did find is that people with high cholesterol levels don't get Alzheimer's. Did you get that? Don't get Alzheimer's, because what's the fattiest organ in the body? It's the brain. And that extra 70% fat is that myelin sheath that is around the nerve cell that comes out of the cell. So let's have a look at how this works. Thank you. Here's the blood vessel. And LDL, because of its low density, is always on the edge. HDL, because of its high density, is always in the middle. And in her book, Put Your Heart in Your Mouth, I think Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride probably called her book that because there were no more names left. We'd used up con, deception, lie, hoax. And she spends the first 3 chapters of her book listing all the environmental poisons that come into our body and damage the little endothelium cells that are lining the arterial wall. And when that damage happens, LDL plugs up the hole. Remember what LDL is? It's the repairer and the rebuilder. It's plugging up the holes. But the people don't realise that what they're washing their clothes in, the polyester underwear, the potatoes that were sprayed with Roundup so that the leaves had died and they could harvest the potato, all of these areas, what they're cleaning their bathroom with, even some people, what they're putting, you know, the makeup, their hair dye, it's just everywhere, it's everywhere. Little by little it comes in and it's causing damage in the arterial walls. And it's building up. So what's happening in the artery? We've got a narrowing of the artery. And something else is happening. When someone's on the high carbohydrate diet, there's a lot of protein molecules usually floating through the blood, and on a high carbohydrate diet releasing huge amounts of glucose, this glucose connects with the protein molecules and it becomes sticky, and it starts sticking on the walls. And maybe we've got a very narrow area here and this one becomes dislodged and gets stuck. That's the number one cause of a stroke. If it happens in the carotid arteries, cardiac arrest, if it happens in the heart. That's the number one cause. Does cholesterol cause heart disease? That's like saying that the fire trucks are causing the fires. Well, they're always there, they must. That the ambulances are causing the accidents. Well, they're always there. All cholesterol is doing is what God designed it to do, which is to clean up the damage or plug up the holes. The number one cause of heart disease is actually damage to the arterial walls. Can this be cleared up? Absolutely. Come to Living Springs Retreat. Go on a detox program. We can't promise you the arteries will be clear in a week, but they will begin to clear. So a friend of mine, his name's David Harris, he's a chiropractic doctor. He's very fit. He's a cyclist. In his 60s, he goes to Europe every year, cycles for 200 kilometres, vegetarian. He was getting breathless. And a friend of his is a cardiac surgeon and he did an angiogram on him and he said, "Whoa, your arteries are blocked." So he had to have some bypasses. And the bypass, they cut out an artery here because it's so blocked up. They cut an artery out of the leg and then sew it into there. And by the way, the artery in that leg's not as strong as this one in the heart. Because by the time the blood gets pumped down to the legs, the arteries don't have to be as strong. I saw David a few weeks later. He said, it's genetics, Barb. I said, genetics loads the gun, David. Lifestyle pulls the trigger. So he came and he did a program with us, so I was able to investigate. As a child, both of his parents were chain smokers. Back then there were only 7,000 chemicals in the cigarettes. Today there's about 14,000 chemicals in the cigarettes. So this little boy is breathing in this passive smoke. What's happening in his arteries? As a child, he's getting built up in the arteries. He said he wanted to put on more muscle, so he started eating at the age of, I think he was late 40s, he started eating tuna every day, tuna. We had a tuna fisherman come and do our program. He said, we catch 10-foot tuna. The bigger the fish, the higher the concentration of mercury. I think it was within about 6 months of having tuna every day, David got mercury poisoning. Now that mercury is coming into his arteries. What's it doing to the arterial walls? Plugging up the holes, plugging up the holes. Can you see the threads that came together? Because people would look at David and they'd say, what's the point in being fit and being a vegetarian? Look at him. But when you have a look at his history and the factors that came together, and as a vegetarian, he does what many vegetarians do, which is what? High carbohydrate. I've met many vegetarians, they stop the meat, and what do they eat? Pasta, bread, cereal. When you stop the meat, you got to replace the meat. What do you replace the meat with? legumes, nuts and seeds, the protein. He was so happy. He was so happy to know why. Didn't God put it in each one of us? Why? Why are these things so? We should all be private investigators investigating why these so, because there's always a reason. So can you see there's not one thing that causes heart disease, strokes? It's a whole lot of little things. And we had a lady do our program from London. She was 48. She was the CEO of a big company and she just had a stroke. They did an angiogram on her. Her arteries were clear. What caused the stroke? So I began to investigate. Tell me about the week before you had the stroke. And she looked a bit embarrassed, so I knew some things were coming that she didn't want me to know. She said, well, I had some deadlines. So she said, I was staying up all night. Sleep's gone down. Do you know while we sleep, our body repairs, revives, rejuvenates? Staying awake all night, what was keeping you awake all night? Sorry, did you say something?
Coffee.
Oh, coffee. And to make it taste a bit better and give us some energy, what was going in the coffee? Sugar. The sugar. She was dehydrated. She didn't want to keep going to the bathroom. She had a lot of work to do. Can you see? Tick, tick, tick. The vessels are constricting. The blood's thick through the dehydration. Stressed out, you know, stress causes this constriction, and she had a stroke. What was her body saying? It's time to stop. It's time to stop. She had clear arteries. So you couldn't blame cholesterol for that one. It's the #1 killer in the world today. It's been the #1 killer in the world probably since the 80s, only since the Industrial Revolution. What happened in the Industrial Revolution? Something else happened. They started to extract oil from hard seeds. And in the extraction process, using heat, using chemicals, it damages the oils. Those oils get into the bloodstream. What do you think they do to the arterial wall? They also damage it. So those altered toxic fats are also contributing to it. People have been eating fat for centuries. It hasn't given them heart disease. It's only since the Industrial Revolution, and since the Industrial Revolution, a lot of chemicals came on the scene. So what's medicine doing to reduce heart disease? Let's make a list. #1, low fat or no fat, yeah? Stop butter, start eating margarine. Has that reduced heart disease? Not at all, no, not at all. Okay, next one. Get as many people as possible on the statin drugs, cholesterol lowering. So cholesterol lowering medication. Has that helped? Not at all, not at all. What do those statin drugs do? Or Crestor, Lipitor, they're probably two of the most popular. What do? They block the pathway in the liver that the liver uses to make cholesterol, so it stops making so much cholesterol. But that same pathway that the liver uses to make cholesterol, it uses to make coenzyme Q10. What's coenzyme Q10? It's your heart protective enzyme. So a person can go on these medications in the hope that they're going to reduce their risk of heart disease. They can actually increase it. And what are the side effects of cholesterol-lowering medication? Memory loss, dementia, Alzheimer's, muscle wasting. We want to build those muscles, not waste them. They've just added another one, breast cancer, because all our sex hormones are made from cholesterol. How many people are getting dementia now who are on the statin drugs? Yes. One lady said, I've just had a stroke and they're telling me to build up my muscles, and I'm on statin drugs which are causing muscle wasting. It doesn't make much sense, does it? You can stop cholesterol-lowering medication immediately there will be a side effect, and that side effect is your memory will return. A person can be on those statin drugs for 10 years and stop immediately. There's no adverse effect. There is an effect, but it's only positive. Aspirin, how many people are told they've got to have blood thinning aspirin over the age of 50? You know what they're finding now? Aspirin causes eye bleeds, that's deterioration of eyesight. Brain bleeds are adding to Alzheimer's, stomach bleeds. And is that getting the heart disease away from number one killer? No. So they've done something else. And the third thing that they have done is lowered the levels. It was probably about 8 years now. A nutritionist and her husband did the program here at Living Springs. They were both in their late 60s. She was a nutritionist. She said, I have the advantage of being in university 40 years ago. She said, 40 years ago, it was very normal to have a cholesterol level of 300. Did you hear that? And if you have a cholesterol level of 190 today, what are you told? You got to go on the meds. And so in Maryland last year, I was talking to a pathologist. She was in her late 60s. She said, I used to do all the testing. She said, we used to consider 350 was perfectly all right. So if you have a cholesterol level of 300, rejoice, you won't get Alzheimer's. And as I've just shown you, you won't have heart disease. That's why you're the doctor. And I'm just giving you the facts. I had to slip that in because the liver makes cholesterol and we're discussing the liver. And this information is important information that we human beings need to know. And do you remember yesterday I showed you two systems, two health sickness systems in the world today. One's based on fear. How many people take cholesterol lowering medication because of fear? Remember what God said? I've not given you the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Your sound mind is considering the information I just told you. And when you know that information, then you realize you don't need to fear a cholesterol level of 300. By the way, if you go under 150, your brain will stop working properly. But what I particularly wanted to show you this morning is what your liver's doing today. Yesterday, you didn't have solid food all day, and your liver went into detoxification. And this happens in 3 phases. All through our life, fat-soluble toxins have been going into our body. Go to the liver, and if it's nasty, the liver says, wrap it up in fat and store it. That's why the Vietnam veteran, when he came to do our program, he said, I'd like to lose a bit of weight, but my doctor says, don't lose weight. Why does the doctor tell him not to lose weight? Because what's in his fat cells? Nasty stuff. Because the Vietnam War was the first war that used chemical warfare big time. He said to me, most of my friends are dead. And he was, so this was 15 years ago, and he was early 50s. He said either suicide or cancer. But he said, I do want to lose a bit of weight, and I actually want to get this stuff out of my body. And I said, you've come to the right place, because I'm going to show you how you can do that. You see, the environmental poisons that come into our body predominantly are in a fat-soluble state. So they're stored in the fat cells and they're fat-soluble. Fat-soluble toxins. Now, we are unable to release fat-soluble toxins. They have to be broken down to a water-soluble state. And that's what you can sweat out in the steam bath. And your liver will bring this fat-soluble toxin to a water-soluble toxin through 3 different phases. Phase 1 began yesterday. Yesterday, your liver took the fat-soluble toxin and broke it down to a metabolite. What's metabolite? A metabolite is the first stage of metabolism or the first stage of breakdown. And this metabolite is highly volatile. This metabolite creates a lot of free radicals, and free radicals damage the tissues. This metabolite sometimes creates something 100 times more toxic than it originally was, definitely in the case of alcohol. And you might look at this and say, well, what's the liver doing? It's just created something worse. It's a process. It's like what happens when you clean the kitchen cupboards out. Your kitchen looks 100 times messier than when it started, yeah? It's like when my son put a new clutch in his car. What do you think the garage looked like halfway through? There's stuff everywhere. Cleaning the garden shed looks 100 times messier than when you started. At this stage, your liver has certain needs. In phase 1, the liver needs antioxidants, because antioxidants, their nickname is free radical scavengers. And antioxidants, the most potent antioxidants are beta-carotenes. And beta-carotenes are found in all your green and orange coloured vegetables. So beta-carotenes is one very potent antioxidant. And notice that every juice you have is either green or red or orange. So we're supplying high antioxidants. The other, probably most famous antioxidant is vitamin C. And we're giving you a dose of vitamin C in every green barley drink. Vitamin C is not ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid is only part of vitamin C. So in plants, you'll find ascorbic acid with bioflavonoids. So if you buy a vitamin C powder or supplement, make sure it's ascorbic acid with bioflavonoids. The third most potent antioxidant is vitamin E, and vitamin E is a fat-soluble vitamin, so you're getting your vitamin E in your protein drinks. Within 36 hours of beginning a detox program, phase 2 kicks in. So phase 2 kicked in this morning. In phase 2, your liver takes this highly volatile, highly toxic metabolite and joins it together with amino acids. So the union of this toxic metabolite with amino acids produces the water-soluble state. And the water-soluble state is what we've all been waiting for, because as a water-soluble, it can be easily released out of the body. And this explains why in phase 2, the requirements are protein. And this is why yesterday we only gave you 2 protein drinks but 3 green barleys, because your requirements for antioxidants were high yesterday. But today we'll be giving you 3 protein drinks, because your liver's requirements for amino acids is greater today, because you've gone into phase 2 of the liver detox. Phase 3 of the liver detox happens in conjunction with phase 2. And in phase 3, the liver takes the water-soluble toxin and it releases it out or back into the bloodstream, where it is released out via your sweat glands. Your most important steam sauna is today, because you'll be releasing more water-soluble toxins today than any other time of the week. You won't stop detoxing tomorrow. It'll just slow down, because now solid food's coming. The water-soluble toxin can also be released out via your urine, which is why it is very important to drink adequate water. You need to drink adequate water so you've got the water to create the sweat to throw off the water-soluble toxin. It's important to drink adequate water so that you're creating enough urine to be able to release out that water-soluble toxin. And it's also important that you ensure that your colon is evacuating at least twice a day, ideally, because some of the water-soluble toxins will be released via your colon. And that's why yesterday I showed you how to ensure that your organs of elimination are eliminating effectively. The liver does a very good job at breaking the fat-soluble toxins down to the water-soluble state, but we need to make sure that we're giving our body the right conditions so that it's being released out as the liver is breaking it down. I think the hardest time is that third steam when you think, I've had enough, but I sit there and think, no, a little bit longer, a little bit longer, I want to get these. Water-soluble toxins out. And I think you'll agree with me, after you've had that cold plunge or cold shower, it's easier to stay in the hot a little bit longer and the cool on the head. As I previously mentioned, you will continue to detox over the next few days, but not as majorly as you are today. Today is the main detox day. This information that I've given you has only been known probably since the early 2000s. And because of advanced equipment, they're able to know more about the body than they knew maybe 20 years ago. I don't think Dr. Atkins knew about the 3 phases of the liver detox by his death, but doesn't explain why people were getting results with his diet. And the only reason they got so many good results is because of all the 3 cups of vegetables a day, and 1 cup had to be green, so that's high beta carotenes. I don't advise his diet today. The meat is not in a good state today. But even if you did live on a mountaintop and everything was organic, it still is not the most superior diet, because when meat breaks down in the body, it leaves a very acid residue. And in the book China Study, Dr. Colin Campbell, he shows how he could turn cancer cells on and off by the amount of meat and dairy products that he was giving to the rats. No, the superior diet is a plant-based diet. But there are many sick vegetarians, and I believe that they're sick vegetarians because they're living over here. They're on that high carbohydrate diet. And as I showed you, you can do it, and we will show you how to do it. And the meals that you eat from tomorrow will be an illustration of how you can do that. When you go home, you might not have the variety that we have here. We certainly show you a lot, but you might look at it and think, I don't think I'd do that, but I'd do that and that. And I think definitely from tomorrow, people are already looking in their mind how they can do that. One lady had already ordered all of the food while she was here, so when she got home, she could actually begin implementing these things. So this explains why, when the Vietnam veteran did our program, we gave him a protein drink every juice. Because what's coming out of his fat cells is pretty toxic. So I said, the good news is you can lose weight, but you need to be careful how you do it. If he did a water fast, he'd be ill. I do not believe a water fast is safe today because of what we all have stored in our fat cells, because we are exposed to approximately 100,000 new chemicals every year. But I thank God that even in 2024 we can live a happy, healthy life as long as we give our body the right conditions. And this also explains why high fibre, lots of veggies with all their beta-carotenes, generous proteins, those plant-based proteins, great fats. And on Thursday, one of my lectures is called Fantastic Fats, where I'll be defining the fats and showing you. But basically, it's your natural fats, fats that come from the hand of the Creator. Yes, your nuts, your seeds, your avocados. But those two oils are extracted from the flesh of the plant and have been used for centuries, your olive oil and coconut oils. So we're going to have a break now.